Hi. Okay. Thought I'd be polite up front. So I'm thinking about, I was about 11 or 12 when I first started to ask myself, what does it mean to truly live? Not just to be alive, but to live with meaning, to live with passion. That question came at the same time that I developed my first big dream for my life, which was to live in the movie Braveheart. There were some challenges, I know, but I had it all mapped out. I was going to be an 11th century Scottish freedom fighter. And it's the perfect dream for a 12-year-old boy, right? Because I was led to believe there was a world with, good and evil, where I could fight villains with a sword and run around in the forest. Women from many different countries would throw themselves at me, checking all the right boxes. But when I think about the movie Braveheart, it really, to me, was ultimately a story about a group of people who were not afraid to die. They were afraid to not truly live. When I was in college, I got to fulfill a lifelong dream. I got a 6-month work visa, and I went and I lived in Scotland. Let me just say, if you have seen the movie Braveheart, and you think that you are ready to live in Scotland, that is not enough information. They've made some updates. I'll never forget the first time I saw a castle, and then next to it a Taco Bell. There are huts everywhere in Scotland. They're the pizza kind. And they hate the movie Braveheart. They have a statue of William Wallace. It looks exactly like Mel Gibson. And they have to fence it in every night because the locals will deface it. It turns out that in terms of accuracy, Braveheart is to Scotland what Cool Runnings is to Jamaica. But I got a job at the Royal Bank of Scotland. I worked in an actual castle. It was pretty cool, but I worked in the mailroom, which was in the basement. Basements of castles are usually dungeons. And that's appropriate. I worked in a dungeon for 6 months, taking huge bags of mail and putting them in slots. And that was the whole job. Not that stimulating, but I had a unique perspective, right? I was only there for 6 months. I was traveling. It was a means to an end. But for my coworkers, many of them older than me, this was their career. This was their end. And still young, still with my career ahead of me and not knowing what that might look like, I wondered to myself, is this your passion? Is this what you hoped you would do with your life? And if it isn't, is this how you hoped you would do it? Complaining all the time about everything. I didn't need to ask. The answer was no. It was not the dream. I had a coworker named John who would sit next to me, and every day, as soon as something irritating or inconveniencing happened, he would loudly announce the number of days he had left until he would retire. 5 years, 8 months, and 22 days. And so in that accent, it was, charming and depressing at the same time. And I would think to myself, we're a long way away from they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. John was very funny, but he was also relentlessly, continuously negative. It seems like his one true passion in life was to complain. He'd complain about the job that he hated. He'd complain about the wife that he didn't like. Complain about the car he couldn't afford and the hangovers from drinking with his buddies every night, which I'm sure he complained there as well. One time I challenged him, I said, John, say one nice thing about your wife. He thought about it for a long time. And he said, she can be quite considerate. Nice. Comes at a price, though. That's some negativity ninjutsu, right? He used a compliment to set up another complaint. Sitting next to John for 6 months, I heard all kinds of crushing catchphrases. He would say, well, that's how they get you. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And his favorite, new day, same old shite. Which is a quote from Shawshank Redemption, said by an actual prisoner. John was not in jail. John was in a job. And that's when it hit me. Whatever John's passion had been, it hadn't vanished, hadn't disappeared. His passion had turned petty. Then I realized that sitting next to me might just be the most inspiring mentor I could ever have, all without him ever knowing it. Over the next 6 months, he taught me all kinds of things. John taught me that you can die long before you're dead. And it happens when you decide to start complaining about your life instead of changing your life. John taught me to be careful with your passion, to protect it. Because if you're not careful with it, it might lead you to smallness instead of to greatness. John taught me that we inspire the people around us, either to be like us or to be anything but us. But mainly, John taught me that I am living in the movie Braveheart. Now, the villains that I'm fighting are not evil kings of England. The villains that I'm fighting are pessimism, cynicism, the failure to act, the temptation to give up. And if I'm not fighting those things, then I'm not really living. I'll never forget the last thing John said. It was 6 months, final day, just about to leave, and I heard John say, 5 years, 2 months, and 12 days. I have never forgotten John. And every time I have found myself working the wrong job, John has given me the courage to leave that, to take my search elsewhere. I have kept searching until I finally found my passion, which I now have found. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a speaker in high schools and colleges. My job is very scary. It's very challenging. It's very vulnerable. It also happens to make me feel completely alive. How do I know this? Mainly because I don't count how many days I have left. When I think about John and I think about the lessons that he left me, I realize that, that question I asked when I was 12 years old, what does it mean to truly live? What does it mean to truly live? I'm not sure that I know, but I know this. It means to use your energy and your strength to chase something that you love. So much so that the only thing you want is to have as many days left as possible. Thank you.